I never wanted to go to the hospital. No one really does, right? But after my accident, a car crash caused by some idiot texting while driving, I didn't have much of a choice. They rushed me to the nearest hospital, Street Vincent's. I'd never heard of it, but I was in and out of consciousness, so it didn't really matter. All I knew was that my leg was in unbearable pain, and I couldn't move it. When I finally came to, I was in a room that felt strange, old-fashioned somehow. The walls were a dull, peeling green, and the lights flickered occasionally. The bed was uncomfortable, with metal rails on the side like an old hospital bed. There was an eerie quietness in the room, broken only by the faint hum of the overhead lights. A nurse came in, her expression blank, her movements almost robotic. Her name tag said Nurse Carla, but she didn't introduce herself. She checked my vitals without saying a word, and when I tried to ask her what was going on, she just looked at me with a vacant stare, then left the room. That's when I noticed something odd, the silence. I couldn't hear any other patients. No doctors or nurses talking, no sounds of machines beeping, just a heavy, oppressive silence. The hours ticked by, and I saw no one except Nurse Carla, who would come in periodically, always with that same blank expression. I tried calling out for help, pressing the call button, but no one answered. Eventually, a doctor came in, a tall man with a thin, gaunt face and deep-set eyes that seemed too dark, almost hollow. His name tag simply read Dr. Reyes. He had an unsettling calmness about him. He explained in a monotone voice that I had a compound fracture in my leg and would need surgery. I asked if my family knew I was here, but he didn't respond directly. Instead, he just said, "Everything is being taken care of." I asked if I could use a phone to call someone, but again, he ignored my question and left the room. That's when I noticed the other bed in the room. It was hidden in shadows at first, but when I looked closer, I saw that it was occupied. A man lay there, his face covered in bandages, his body hooked up to an IV that seemed old and yellowed. He was completely still, and I couldn't tell if he was even breathing. The feeling of dread began to creep in. Something was wrong with this place. I tried to get out of bed, but the pain in my leg was too much. I felt trapped, like a prisoner in this eerie, silent hospital. The night was worse. I woke up to strange noises, whispers, faint footsteps in the hallway, the sound of something dragging across the floor. I turned to look at the man in the other bed, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw him move. But when I blinked, he was still again, like he hadn't moved at all. I decided I couldn't stay there any longer. I managed to drag myself out of bed, biting down on the pain in my leg. I needed to find someone, anyone, who could help me or explain what was going on. I shuffled down the hallway, using the wall for support. The hallways were dimly lit and seemed to stretch on forever. The place looked abandoned, like it hadn't been in use for years. As I turned a corner, I saw a group of nurses standing together, whispering. Their faces were pale and gaunt, their uniforms stained and old. I called out to them, but they didn't react. It was like they didn't hear me at all. Then, one of them turned to face me, and I saw her eyes, completely black, like twin voids staring right through me. I backed away, terrified, and turned to run back to my room. When I got back, the man in the other bed was sitting up, his bandaged face turned toward me. He raised a hand and slowly peeled away the bandages, revealing a face that was decayed, flesh rotting away to reveal bone. I screamed, but no sound came out. The man, if he was even still a man, grinned at me with a mouth of broken, yellow teeth, and then he spoke in a rasping, inhuman voice. "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, and then the door to my room slammed shut. I was trapped. I banged on the door, shouting for help, but the walls seemed to absorb the sound. I turned back to the creature in the bed, but it was gone. The bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed. Just then, Nurse Carla appeared, standing in the doorway, her eyes black like the other nurses. "Your surgery is ready," she said in that flat, robotic tone. Behind her, I could see Dr. Reyes and more nurses with those empty, black eyes, waiting for me to come with them. Realizing I had no other choice, I forced myself to move, hobbling toward them on my injured leg. As they led me down the hallway, I noticed the walls seemed to pulse and move, almost like they were breathing. The air grew colder, and the fluorescent lights overhead flickered more violently. They took me to a darkened operating room, the equipment rusty and outdated. I tried to resist, but the nurses held me down on the table. Dr. Rees loomed over me, holding a scalpel that looked ancient, covered in rust and something dark. His voice echoed as he spoke. "This is going to hurt, but it's necessary." As the scalpel descended, I felt a sharp, searing pain, and everything went black. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. I was back in my original room, my leg in a cast. The hospital seemed normal again. The walls a clean white, the bed a modern design. A nurse came in, but it wasn't Nurse Carla. She had a kind face, and she looked at me with genuine concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You were screaming in your sleep." I didn't know how to respond. Had it all been a dream? A nightmare brought on by the pain and medication, but it had felt so real. I asked her about Nurse Carla and Dr. Rees, but she just looked confused. "There's no one by those names here," she said. "My family arrived shortly after, relieved to see I was awake and alert. They told me I had been in a car accident and had undergone surgery for my leg. They had been by my side the entire time." As I looked around the room, everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As they wheeled me out of the hospital the next day, I asked one of the nurses if she knew anything about the other patient in my room, the man with the bandages. She looked puzzled. "There was no other patient in your room," she said. "You were the only one." As we passed through the hallways, I couldn't help but glance back. Just before we exited, I saw it. Nurse Carla standing at the end of the hallway, watching me with those hollow, black eyes. I blinked, and she was gone. I don't know what happened in that hospital, if it was real or just some hallucination. As if my experience at Street Vincent's wasn't enough, I've recently discovered something that's kept me up at night. After I got home, I tried to forget about everything that happened. I tried to convince myself it was all some drug-induced nightmare. But then 3 days ago, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Street Vincent's hospital. At first, I thought it was a bill or some insurance paperwork. But when I opened it, there was only a single piece of paper with a message printed in a shaky, uneven script. "You left something behind." I felt a chill run down my spine. There was no signature, no return address, just those 4 words. I tried to ignore it, to write it off as some kind of prank or mistake. But then yesterday, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to pick up. I wish I hadn't. A familiar voice came through the receiver, distorted by static, but unmistakable. It was Dr. Reyes. "We need you to come back," he said, his voice echoing with that same unsettling calmness. "There's been a complication." I hung up immediately, my hands shaking. I didn't understand how this was happening. How could someone who didn't exist be calling me? And why did they want me to go back? I tried calling the hospital directly to get some answers. But when I asked for Dr. Rees or Nurse Carla, the operator told me there were no employees by those names. I demanded to speak to someone in charge, but they said the hospital was currently closed for renovations. It didn't make sense. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Dr. Rees, Nurse Carla, and the bandaged man in the bed. I decided I needed to know more. I needed to understand what had happened to me, what this place really was. I started searching online for any information I could find about Street Vincent's. Most of the search results were normal, a few news articles, a couple of reviews. But then I found an old forum post from over a decade ago, titled "The Unseen Patient of Street Vincent's." My heart raced as I clicked on it. The post was by someone named Emily who claimed she had been a patient there years ago. Her experience sounded eerily similar to mine. The strange staff, the empty halls, the feeling of being trapped in a place that didn't seem real. Emily wrote about a patient who was always in the next room over, never seen but always heard. A man who whispered through the walls, asking for help. She wrote about how the nurses never acknowledged him, how they acted like he wasn't there. She said that when she tried to leave, the whispers got louder, pleading with her not to go. Eventually, she escaped, but not without being haunted by nightmares of the man's voice. Then, at the bottom of the post, was a chilling line. "If you've been to Street Vincent's and heard the whispers, it's already too late. He's coming for you." I tried to brush it off as some internet horror story, But then I heard it myself. Last night, as I lay in bed, I heard whispering, soft at first, but growing louder. It was coming from the walls, from the floor, from everywhere around me. Help me, the voice said. I'm still here. Don't leave me. I shot up in bed, my heart pounding. The whispers continued, persistent and desperate. You left me behind, it said. Come back. Come back and help me. I covered my ears, but the voice was inside my head now, relentless. I scrambled out of bed and turned on every light in the house, trying to drown out the whispers, but they wouldn't stop. I knew what it meant. I had left something behind at Street Vincent's, something that wasn't going to let me go so easily. This morning, I found another letter. This one wasn't from Street Vincent's. It was a plain white envelope with my name scrawled in black ink. Inside was a photo of me lying in that hospital bed, unconscious, my leg bandaged up. Next to me, the figure with the bandaged face. But this time, his face wasn't hidden. He was staring directly into the camera, directly at me, with those black, hollow eyes. And beneath the photo, a message. You know where to find me. I don't know what to do. I can't stay here, but I can't go back to Street Vincent's. I'm trapped, just like Emily said. The whispers are getting louder, more insistent. I'm starting to see things, shadows moving in the corners of my vision, figures standing at the foot of my bed. I don't know how long I have before they come for me, before I'm pulled back to that place. But I know one thing for sure. I can't escape them. Not as long as I'm alive. I'm writing this now as a warning to anyone who might listen. If you ever find yourself in a hospital that feels wrong, that seems to have a life of its own, leave immediately. Don't stay. Don't ask questions. Just run. Because once you're marked by Street Vincent's, there's no escaping it. I can hear the voice again now, louder than ever. It's calling me, telling me it's time to return. I don't think I can resist much longer. If you're hearing this, please, don't let yourself become the next patient. Don't let them take you like they're about to take me.